Hi everyone, I am Lisa Tagliaferri. You might know me from my Python tutorials on the DigitalOcean community site. I am also a researcher and an educator. Today I would like to talk to you about incorporating the humanities, fields like history, literature, and philosophy into our Python practice. So thinking in an interdisciplinary way can help us as programmers be more successful. Additionally, by bringing more fields into conversation with Python, we may be able to open the doors for more people to join us to make cool things for broader communities. Okay, so what do you have when you want to understand more about gender and gender roles in the 19th century? Perhaps you can begin this research by reading some text. You know, how many books can we read? We could think about how we might build a good representative corpus. If we're thinking about gender, we don't want to limit ourselves to one gender of author, for example. We want to think about cultural aspects of the 19th century. We want to consider what nations actually exist during the 19th century. We want to think about what the canon is as we have it today and compare it to what was popular during the time. We want to begin to think about the language. We want to think about verbs. We want to think about adjectives. How do they apply to different gender pronouns? And finally, we want to think about those characters. What are these characters doing? How are they being described? So with all of these considerations and more, what do we have now? We might have a bit of a splitting headache. I don't know if you could see very well, but there is a weapon through this person's head. But we also have a humanities problem. So traditionally in the humanities, we would solve this problem by looking at the literature. We would look at primary sources. We would see what other researchers in the field are saying. We would go into our archives, and our result would be very likely a peer-reviewed journal article. This journal article is probably not of any interest at all to computer scientists, but thinking as people who are interested in Python, we might think about this problem in a very different way. So if we look at this problem again and we bring Python into it, we could start to look at it programmatically. So we could bring in a corpus of novels through a data store, something like Project Gutenberg. We could standardize and clean this data, and then we could start to perform some statistical analysis. Something like the Dunning's log likelihood, which will tell us something about the distinctiveness of words across these texts. We could also do some natural language processing, and we could see what ultimately we find. In a Mellon-funded lab at MIT with faculty, postdoctoral researchers, administrators, and 25 freshman computer science students, we compiled a corpus of 4,200 English language novels, and we did this work. Many of the students already knew how to do a lot of these things, at least in theory, in their classrooms. They have been working in Python for a while. So approaching this work, what is it that they actually learned? They learned about ambiguous and tricky humanities data. They learned about the historical context of their data set, how their work intersects with gender theory and philosophy, and they learned how to discuss their work with other stakeholders, in this case, literature professors. Importantly, they learned how to collaborate together in a lab. They learned how to work out social situations. They learned how to get code off of their local computers and into a common repo without breaking it. And these are all of the things that they started to benefit from. So coming from that perspective, let's dig a little bit deeper into the methodology that we used and the existing results that we found. So the first thing that we had to do was deal with that ambiguous data of the humanities. We started encountering ambiguous data from the very beginning when we were building our data set. Here you can see an interpretation of us trying to wrangle Python to create a corpus of thousands of texts to analyze. We worked with Project Gutenberg's database. We first started by bringing together 100 books manually to see what it would be like to do it programmatically, what are some of the issues we would face. We found that there would be a lot of issues. Project Gutenberg does not come with all of the metadata that we needed. We had to look at the dates for each of these texts. And eventually, we had to cross-check also with genre. So we wanted novels in particular, but we found that some of the texts there were poetry, they were nonfiction works. A student in one of their summaries wrote, quote, "This led to the realization that there was an inadequate definition of novel," end quote. I have a PhD in literature, and I'm still not totally sure what a novel is, but the students, they eventually did define the parameters that they would use, and they set the terms for the filter. We agreed on automated methods to generate our corpora, and like good interdisciplinary thinkers, we considered the ethics and legal issues around scraping data, and we eventually used mirrors and rsync to download this data. So some of the approaches that we took to coding was also bringing a historical context. So in 1999, NASA intended to place the Mars Climate Orbiter at an optimal position for an orbital insertion maneuver that would bring the spacecraft around Mars at an altitude of 226 kilometers. Or was it miles? NASA took the blame for this, but there was just different measures that they were taking. So eventually we lost the Mars probe, and we tried to compel students by using this historical example of thinking through like testing their code. We started testing code with the doc test module to interactively test our Python. So in this example here, we want to count vowels in a given word. We created the function count underscore vowels. If we pass the string Paris to it and run it, the return will be 2. Then we spent a lot of time testing this, thinking about edge cases. Is this actually working? So one of the first issues that we ran into as a lab was the string Oslo. This is because of the uppercase O. So when you run this code, the test will fail. Fix it. Yes, so then word dot lower we added here, and then we continue to test and refine. What about Y? What about accented vowels? What about ligatures? It turns out all of these things, all of this ambiguity around the words would be actually really important for our statistical analysis of text. So what about our traditional humanists, so the humanists that are going to the archives, the humanists that are not working with Python? How do we interact with them? So many people who are not trained in computer science will not know what to do with this. This is a simulation of assembly on the 1950s computer, IBM 704. This is another project that the lab worked on. So humanists would not know what to do when presented with this, but also very likely many people in the general public would not know either. So since we were trying to build these projects for humanists, we had to think more like them. We had to serve researchers in the humanities, in this case historians, and we needed to grapple with how to meet them where they are. So working through these challenges and adding some helper text and an interactive tool to get through what assembly language is and how is this important to the history of computers was able to make the students become more thoughtful programmers, and it also helped the end users overall. So after our work on the Gender Novels project, what are the things that we found in our analysis? So here we looked at what adjectives were associated with feminine and masculine pronouns. We iterated through each novel's tokenized text. We considered windows of 10 words. When the central word of a window was a gendered noun, any adjectives that fell within that window would be counted as associated to that noun. The numbers shown here are calculated by number of feminine, masculine pronoun associations. As you look at these charts, what you can see is a lot of the feminine pronouns are related to what you would think of as stereotypical feminine words, things like beautiful, pretty, sweet. The masculine pronouns are more associated with generic words such as old, good, young, little, etc. We ran a Dunning's log likelihood with a number of parts of speech. In this case, it was verbs. So the data show comparisons between how male and female authors write about male and female characters, respectively. We compared the difference in verbs that are used to describe characters based on the author's gender. So one of the more interesting results was the distinctiveness of verb phrases applied to the different genders. When a male author writes a female character, she is often relegated to the role of respondent, very likely to a male interlocutor, or they are rendered more in a passive or objective, like an object state. When a female author writes a female character, that character is much more likely to perform actions and also to have an interior life. We collected instant distances by looking at the distance between each feminine or masculine pronoun per book. The graph on the left here, this one shows the most extreme instance distances by pronoun in a corpus, and this graph is on the log scale, just to note. The instant distances for feminine pronouns are greater than those for masculine pronouns, all in all, regardless of the author's gender. The novel with the greatest median female instance distance was Don Hale with the Flying Squadron by William Crispin Shepard. This had an average of 19,713.5 words between feminine pronouns. That is nearly 20,000 words. As a counterexample, the greatest median male instance distance was 43.5 words. That was in Marjorie's Busy Days by Carolyn Wells. So all this research makes things seem pretty dire for women and gender minorities of this time. Even worse than we may have thought going into the project. So it's a good thing that we are not living in the Victorian age, right? So in the tech industry, there is a lot of disparity around diversity and inclusion. And I know this is not true of every space, and I would like to recognize how great Pi Gotham has been with creating a diverse and inclusive space. And I know that many people here are thinking about these issues and talking about them as well. But if we look at major tech companies and their data, so here we have Airbnb, Facebook, Microsoft, Google, Apple, and Yahoo, for example. We see that men who are from well-represented backgrounds make up the vast majority of the workforce. So these are the tall bars on each of these discrete bar charts. Underrepresented people of color, and this is Black, Latinx, Indigenous, and mixed race folks, are more underrepresented than you may think. Underrepresented women of color do not make up even 10% of the workforce in any of these 6 companies. Okay, so this is the industry. We know there are problems with sourcing, with recruiting, with hiring. How are things looking in the developer space writ large? How are things looking in open source? In a 2017 open source survey by GitHub with partners in academia and industry, the researchers found that open source is definitely not an inclusive space. A full 95% of the respondents identified as men, 3% identified as women, and 1% as non-binary. In terms of race, 16% of respondents to this survey said they belong to ethnic or national groups that are in the minority in the country they live in. So this is pretty dire. It doesn't look great. But I would like to suggest that expanding the fields that are in conversation with technology and with Python can help to bring more people into this space. So this is what our digital humanities lab looked like last year. So far, the lab has proven itself to be a space that drives diversity and also inclusion, and it supports thinking across field. The inaugural lab cohort's undergraduate population consisted of over 80% female students, and this is drawing from a computer science population of 40% female students, and nearly double the percentage of underrepresented minority students at MIT as a whole. These students were also paid to contribute to open source. They drew from funds from the Undergraduate Research Opportunity Program, also called the UROP. The lab and the software that we shipped was benefited from all of these diverse perspectives that were working together to build this stuff, and everybody collaborating together in a communal space. So far, the Gender Novels project, the result of some of that work that we did, has had a few press mentions, and it is also now being generalized as a gender analysis toolkit by the Digital Humanities Lab. Specific projects can have larger applications. We can apply this toolkit potentially to issues that are affecting us today. To highlight some other projects that I've worked on, just to give you a sense of the digital humanities space as a whole, this is the archival history of computing at MIT from 1950 to 62. This is a Django project that is a digital archive. A lot of this work involved interacting directly with archivists at MIT and the Special Collections Library. Students went and looked at actual documents from the 1950s and 60s to get an understanding of how computer science was starting to develop. Students also did simulations in JavaScript. This is my dissertation project. This is on Catherine of Siena. She's a 14th century Italian mystic writer. She's often relegated to the space of a religious or historical figure, but I was able to use programming, specifically Python, R, and also JavaScript D3, to start to recover her as a literary figure in her own right. I did work to compare her corpora with the works of Dante, of Petrarch, and Boccaccio. And I also did network analysis to see how she was a community figure embedded within the world of Italian culture, and was working to bring more people into knowledge production through working in the, I would argue, the technology of the vernacular language coming out of Latinate culture. And here, one of my favorite pictures of Catherine, I think of this as Catherine being attacked by internet trolls. Some work that's currently in process is the Purpose of Education, a large-scale text analysis of university mission statements. This is something I'm working on with Danica Savanek at SUNY Cortland. She is a professor that does multicultural literature there. So this also involved a lot of ethical web scraping to build our corpus, but we were looking at United States colleges and universities' mission statements and comparing them against students' demand statements to see whether they were collaborative or whether there was tension. We found that universities emphasize careers, training, and skills development, while students are looking for more diversity and inclusion. They're looking more for funding, and they are also more concerned with the people that are in the universities. So this is not the only spot of digital humanities. There's a lot of people working in the digital humanities field, and Python in particular is a very popular language in this space. Other folks in the DH space are using these methodologies to bring VR into history classrooms. They are doing hackathons to serve contemporary social causes. They are creating natural language processing toolkits to look at classical languages. They are making medieval manuscripts highly available in digital archives, and much more. So if we think back to our DH Lab students, in the future, they are probably not going to be looking at 19th century literature, but they will have to solve tough problems in the real world. These problems are not going to be clear. They will need to understand who is impacted by the software that they build. They will have to communicate effectively across fields to lots of different stakeholders, many who are not technical. They will go out into industry, go out into different spaces, but they will bring this interdisciplinary thinking with them. So by incorporating the humanities into this computer science learning that they're doing right now, they already have experience in challenging themselves in these ways and more. And a lot of this is focused around universities, but the humanities and humanities thinking is not just useful within those codified spaces of teaching and learning. The humanities can help us also to negotiate ambiguous data. It could help us bring a critical lens to the technology that we're building. It could be used as a toolkit for more inclusive software, and it could also open up lines of inquiry to interrogate biases in machine learning algorithms, for example. Important also is to not just think about digital technologies and programming as the only way to solve problems, archives, research that is done offline, and also communication are ways to supplement the work that we're doing. So the digital humanities are a good way to begin to think about interdisciplinary thinking, but the humanities is not the only site to start to push against those boundaries of discipline. People in the fine arts, people in medicine, people in psychology and other social sciences can all benefit from working with Python to solve the problems that they have. Programmers also who are coming to these fields or thinking through their projects from that perspective and who develop interdisciplinary thinking can start to innovate at the intersections of these fields and push at the boundaries. If we start to break down the disciplinary silos, we can all begin to participate in broader dialogues, and that can better inform our Python projects, and it could also allow more communities to come in to make sure that everybody is being well served. Emojis. Cool. So, yay, Hacktoberfest. How can we get involved in digital humanities? There are some digital humanities open source that we could contribute during Hacktoberfest, which is celebrated during the month of October, or anytime really. There is the Classical Language Toolkit. It uses natural language processing to support languages of ancient classical and medieval Eurasia. Manifold Scholar is an open educational resource generator. It's a publishing platform that teachers can use to distribute text to students for free. Hypothesis is run by a nonprofit, and they are committed to annotating the web and creating dialogues across the web through this annotation. Corpus DB is a textual corpus database that's trying to bring metadata to the text from places like Project Gutenberg. And the gender analysis toolkit that I mentioned, I heard that they could use some documentation. Other places to look for DH projects are local libraries, museums, university groups. And I will tweet these out, but here's some digital humanities networks. Haystack, there's NYCDH, which is local here. Other cities also have DH communities, so I know Boston does. If you're interested in contributing knowledge, Programming Historian is a peer-reviewed online open access journal that will, very much like humanities driven Python, and also Write for Donations is a DigitalOcean's community site that accepts tutorials. Thank you.